Welcome to episode 20 of the White Whale Marketing Podcast in collaboration with the Sport Marketeer. As always, I'm Chris Nascimento, and today we're joined by Haral. Haral, how's it going?
Not too bad. Hey, everybody.
Yeah. So as you can kind of see by the title of this video, um, it's the year in review video for sports marketing. So today we're going to be talking about all the different things that we thought have had an impact, and it's going to be three major topics. And to find out more about these major topics, you can listen to this episode, or for in further detail, you can check out the Sport Marketeer link in bio. You can read our Substack newsletter, where it will send the newsletter directly to your inbox, or you can visit our website there. And yeah, you can have a little more detail to find out about these topics that had a major impact in sports marketing this past year. With that, we have three topics to cover, as always, and the three topics are um, NFTs. Obviously, that's a huge part of the world now, right? That's just been everywhere. Second is going to be regarding content within sports. And last but not least, considering we're white whale marketing, it's going to be all about athletes and their worth, and how they've taken over this year, right? It's the year of the athlete, as the title says. So let's get into it. Raul, you want to take us off?
Yeah, of course. So the year started and ended in a very, very different way from what we were expected. Obviously, the pandemic is still on. So the three letters that are on top of everyone's mind is usually WTF when you're waiting on new updates on the situation, vaccines, and all of the chaos that comes with COVID. But when it comes to sports, I think the three biggest letters this year are NFT. And in the piece that I'm going to write, there's going to be a lot more information about what like the technical stuff behind NFTs is. But essentially, it's a digital collectible. And we're taking the world of collectibles and applying them to a digital space using very, very like buzzwordy terms like, the blockchain, for example, and the world of crypto. We found a way for technology to validate and certify each and every digital piece of artwork that gets created. So similar to the way hockey cards have their own like serial numbers and they have specific value because they're one of a kind, or maybe they're part of like a set of 100, NFTs are the exact same thing. So, we've heard words like, the metaverse, we've talked about the virtual world, VR, augmented reality, all that stuff. NFTs are almost like a bridge where you're taking the tangible world of physical collectibles, applying it to something completely virtual, and still adding value to it. And the reason why I think this year is definitely a big year for NFTs is because the entire sports world has been engulfed with NFTs over the entire calendar year. I think the best place to start with talking about NFTs is talking about three special NFTs that were actually minted right here at home by the White Whale marketing team. Chris, I'll probably hand this over to you, but do you want to maybe walk us through the journey of the inspiration behind why we wanted to start these NFTs, what these NFTs are, and maybe show the audience what it's like, and just walk us through why White Whale marketing entered the NFT space?
For sure. So I guess we can just show it now. So for those of you aren't aware, we released three NFTs, if I'm not mistaken, for three athletes that are working with us to grow their brand. Obviously, here the one you're seeing is in regards to Nico, and this all started with kind of Nico, right? Uh, I think we announced Ben as the first athlete for White Whale Marketing, and then Nico had the connection to him, reached out to us. He's like, "Hey, I'd be interested." And as we had that meeting, he's like, "Hey, like, I want to be, gotta pick our words here, the first athlete in a given league," is what I can say. Um, and he's like, "Hey, do you know how to, make NFTs?" I was like, "I have no idea what an NFT even is. I have a general idea, but I'm like, yeah, let's figure it out. That's what we're all about." So, Raul, I think you and AJ, I think that was like your first week, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And then I think we took a week to do research, figure it all out. I know we're writing articles and we're coming up with a plan on how to launch it. And then afterwards, we reached out to an artist because obviously we can't draw or we can't even illustrate something as close to this, right? So we had a nice Canadian artist kind of formulate some things for us. And as you can see, everyone has their own kind of little logo that had, their own NFT merch that kind of related to it, right? And yeah, with that, we kind of launched it. Nico was the first in a certain league. I think Micah was the second, And then at the time, Ben wasn't signed yet, but I think he should be the second one in the same league as Nico, is what I can say. But yeah, no, it was awesome. It was a cool experience. Um, Lots of learning. I think we got a lot of traction from that as well. And what we also created something similar to we were talking about this before the podcast is like Gary Vee. We added value beyond just the digital trading card, right? Where whoever purchased this NFT, they're going to be able to get a free piece of merchandise from the collection from each of these athletes for whichever one they purchased. They were going to be able to meet with them, and then maybe even now and then touch have some meetings with us where they can give us their opinion regarding their brand. The only issue is with what is it? The rise of crypto at the time, the gas prices, which is what it's called to actually put things onto the blockchain, was extremely high. Where we're only going to charge about, I think at the time it was 20 Canadian in the equivalent of Ethereum, and I think the gas price alone was going to be $700 to do it, or 350, something excessive. And we're like, hey, that doesn't make any sense, and we don't want people having a bad taste in their mouth or a negative sentiment to the athletes. Or like, hey, we went the full 95%. We put it on. It's in the block. Like, it's available. People can bid on it. We weren't gonna transfer ownership. So that's where we would have had to edit the blockchain where it is like who owns that NFT. So yeah, we went all the way to the goal line, and then we basically took a knee, which isn't always the best, or let's say field goal. That sounds.
I think we called it timeout.
Yeah, we called the timeout. We're like, hey, and I've received some offers, or I think one or two here and there. Well, I'm not really interested in selling them at the time. Where we'll see where it goes. I think it's cool to have. I think it's part of the brand's history. Same thing for the athletes, and yeah, we did everything. We created their first NFTs, first for some certain leagues, and yeah, created some merch. Nico's merch did really well because he was the one that actually wanted some merch, and yeah, it was a cool experience. And that's the whole thing when we talk about white wall marketing, being agile, trying new things out. I think that's what it's all about. Where we took a week to be like, hey, we have no idea what this is, to then actually having a campaign, launching it, and etc. Yeah, so good times. And Haral, you can touch on it too because you're a part of it.
Yeah, I think the beauty and the value of this is, even though like at the end of the day, I think with NFTs, a lot of things that people focus on are the numbers at the end. Like, how much did this sell for? We'll talk about NBA Top Shot a bit later, but we've heard about like big NFTs that are going on sale for like thousands, if not millions of dollars in like US dollar currency, but obviously in the equivalent of cryptocurrency, and people are like dumbfounded by those numbers, right? But what I think is really important is that, again, like the whole point of cryptocurrency, or the whole point of NFTs, is time. Like, these were minted, we posted them, they're available, people can see them. White Whale Marketing owns them, and whether we sell them or not, like you said, Chris, you want to hold on to them. No one can take that away from us. So it's not always about selling that. It's not always about being the first to sell, buying into the hype or selling it at its peak and stuff. Because at the end of the day, we created something that exists on this virtual platform, and it's there to stay forever. Like, there are hundreds of thousands of computers all over the world that are connected into ensuring that this validity and the certification of this token is ours and ours alone. So I think that's probably the coolest part about it. With NFTs, I think the value part is something interesting that you've been talking about. So I want to talk about an example. Chris, if you can go over to the NBA Top Shot tab there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
Cool. So you'll see here on the screen, this is NBA Top Shot. So these are the NFTs that are officially licensed by the NBA and works with a company called Dapper Lab. So they create moments, like if Chris is going to click on one there, they take NBA highlights, almost like GIFs, for example, but they turn them into collectibles. So instead of basketball trading cards, you're essentially got moments, which is operate the same equivalent of trading cards. You see this Jimmy Butler one, there's 40,000 of them that are circulated, and this person, B-Town 905, wonder who that handsome fella is, owns set number 14,353. For all the folks at home, this is my Top Shot collection. I definitely do like to say I dabbled into it. So I've got a couple of moments here. I've got a couple of packs just to kind of explore the space and what it's like. And it's literally just like collecting hockey cards or basketball cards, but now it's on a digital space. What's cool about Top Shot is that Chris talked about value and adding value outside of the NFT in order to create something for it and create some value out of it for the audiences. Top Shot doesn't really do that. You don't really get something tangible by owning these moments. Like I have an assist from Steven Adams, nice little behind the back there. You can see that it's sold for $1,000. Someone bought it for $999 as the top sale. It's really hard to kind of estimate and judge the value of the markets. But going back to the value point of it, like I'm not getting anything extra from Top Shot by buying these moments. But with the NFTs that we release, with some of the other NFTs that are being released by Austin Matthews for charity and stuff, there is some tangible memorabilia that's also available for those who own the NFT. So there's two paths the world of sports can kind of take with NFTs, which is what I really want to highlight here. But besides the adding value and the idea of people owning collectibles, Chris, I'd love to maybe just talk about more about what do you think about the year in NFTs? Because I know like you mentioned, you're not completely sure about what the space looks like, what it's going to look like. But as it maybe progressed throughout the years and as we kept seeing NFT become a household name in sports, do you think the sporting community is on the right track here with NFTs, or is there some areas of concern that we need to worry about?
I think yes and no to everything, right? There's like a balance act, right? Where we were talking about this before we went on air, right? Where, as you said, Top Shot, very cool. You can own certain moments, and like you said, it's essentially almost like a digital trading card, but now it's like a GIF or a highlight package. And for sure, like we were looking at LeBron's, right? LeBron, what would they call it? LeBron NFTs, right?
Yeah.
For we started recording, and I'm sure 100% positive. Once he retires, hits a milestone, wins another championship, etc., there's going to be a rise in the value of those NFTs. Similar to where, let's use the shoe example of StockX, where you see the stock of a shoe going up. Where unfortunately, when Virgil Abloh passed away, Off-White shoes rose, right? Where it's just basic economic scarcity, right, or XYZ, like what's available on the market. Well, that's basically what it is. That's the value that's there. Is hey, like what's the quantity, who wants it, and it's a buy and sell market, right? Whereas, the NFTs we wanted to create, and we see some too with VeeFriends and Gary Vee, where they sell NFTs, and obviously they increase in value just like other ones from basic economics, buy, sell, etc. But they add additional assets and benefits to it, right? Where I think for VeeFriends, you get a ticket to what's it called? The V conference or whatever Gary Vee's conference is called every year. You get set up in a community depending on what type of NFT you purchased, and you're basically buying into this like business community, right? For people with like-minded interests, right? I think if you're a crab, you're like a creative crab. I think that's what it's called. So by purchasing this NFT, you're now joining this creative community, and then you can connect with them. You can network. You're basically buying into a network, and that's where the real value is with VeeFriends. And that's something we wanted to do too with the NFTs, where let's say someone paid $20 Canadian equivalent for a crypto. They don't really care what the value ends up being. It'd be great if it goes up, but if it goes down, that's fine too, because hey, I would have met an athlete I was interested in. I purchased maybe a part of history, or I just bought something because I enjoyed the way it looked or what it was. And that way, connecting back to our athletes and sports and sporting brands as a whole, it doesn't affect the brand, right? Because there's not going to be any negative sentiment to them if the value goes down, because they're like, I don't care because I was buying it to meet this athlete, or I was buying it to go to the conference or to get into this network. So I think that's, if it continues down that path, I love it. The metaverse aspect, right? We talked about a few weeks ago, where maybe people are going to start purchasing, art, and maybe they're going to start purchasing highlight packages so they put in their metaverse home. That aspect, I think you'd have to be a certain type of consumer to be doing that.
That's a good way to put it.
I personally I don't like to show that type of stuff, right? I like my blank clothing, my simple hats, and yeah, but there's a market for everything, right? So it all depends who you're targeting.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the last thing I'll say about NFTs is obviously it's evolving, and the whole point of this week's episode is just to talk about the trends of 2021. The majority of us or something you'll tell is that the trends that we're talking about don't stop or end in 2021. Obviously, they have implications for the years to go. But I feel like there's an equal amount of people that would call me crazy for buying these Tim Hortons hockey cards that would also equally call me crazy for buying NFTs. So like obviously there's a consumer base for it. Where there's money, I've found there's product and there's always something new that's being created for people to buy and own. And that's what I think NFTs ultimately is. We'd also like to talk about the pros and the cons. The last thing I'll talk about, because Chris, you mentioned a great point with the gas prices and stuff. This is a cryptocurrency issue and a blockchain issue in general. The environmental impact is still being assessed, and it's still like the impact of the blockchain universe on our environment is a bit more than what you would expect from like what a digital space would look like, just because the amount of mining that it takes, the amount of electricity that it generates to keep these machines operating is taking a toll on our carbon footprint. So that's an interesting thing to look at as well, where, you know, sports is figuring something out. It's cool, it's trendy, but because it's virtual, we're not necessarily seeing like, you know, the tangible impacts of it. We talked about, you know, tangible value, but we're not necessarily looking at our tangible consequences. And I think that's an important thing to remember at the end of the year, or as the year comes to an end, is that there is still a real world price that is being paid for creating the blockchain and minting these NFTs. And it's ironic because Amazon, or not Amazon, the Seattle Kraken, who are in they play in Climate Pledge Arena, and their whole thing was about sustainability. They're receiving a lot of negative press and like bad taste, as you would say, because they launched their own NFTs, and people are citing the environmental consequences of NFTs and why the Kraken are diving into this new space. So definitely an interesting to look out for. Obviously, trends are important. The environment's an important trend, I think, to end off 2021 as well. So with, you know, the cool things and aspects about the like digital sphere that we look at, I think it's equally important to just remember the real world we live in and the impacts they may have on it.
Yeah, no, 100%. Where I don't know. I think now because we think everything is digital, right, it doesn't have an impact on things, but it's always cool to like just step back and, you know, realize what it actually looks like, right? So no, I completely agree, and I think it's the perfect time to kind of get into the next topic, right, with our year in review special. That's going to be content, right? So for those of you in Canada, you see Haral with a bunch of Canucks merchandise in the back. I'm in Ottawa. I'm sure there's a bunch of people in between, or far east, far west. Yeah, games are being impacted, right, with COVID. That's the world we're in right now. And with that, teams are having, you know, games being postponed because the NHL doesn't want to have games played if there's no attendance coming in, because that means dollars aren't there, right? So then that's the balancing act they're creating. And then with that, right, the less people come into the games, the less people seeing signage, X, Y, Z. You know, it affects all areas of the business, and one of them being is, you know, sponsorship or even different things like that. So then with that, you're now seeing a bunch of teams or even leagues or even just media companies really kind of pushing the content space, right? Where I have a list here, and I'm just going to read it off, and then people can just get a thought for this. So we've seen things like Drake in Monday Night Football. Would we have seen that before COVID? Who knows? Nickelodeon, the NFL, obviously that's something that's continued. All or Nothing on Amazon Prime, Drive to Survive. That's a series that just obviously started beforehand, but it's gained more notoriety since. And one thing I've noticed too, right, where a lot of teams are also doing their own content series on YouTube now, right? Where, let's be honest, with less people being able to go to the games, and even maybe sometimes the chance of games being canceled, hey, they don't know if they can sell as many, you know, TV ads or, you know, rights or etc. The list goes on and on. But with that, if you can kind of create your own content pieces and you don't need fans to actually be in stands, then you can kind of create another asset of, hey, like, let's create this 24/7 hard knocks type of feel to this. And when athletes are, you know, working out, we can put a Gatorade, you know, product placement. We can partner with them or BioSteel X, Y, Z. So I think it's pretty interesting to see how that change and see where people are going with it, because obviously it has an impact. And bringing back to what will marketing, with teams investing more into content pieces, they're going to be looking for athletes with strong brands, right? They want those personalities to stick out. And obviously that's a little bit natural. But if someone who has a strong personality, there's two people with strong personalities, and one has a strong social media following and is very active and, you know, engaging with their audience, whereas the other one's like, hey, here's my dog, here's my mom, here's my car. People are like, oh, okay, like, I don't know who this guy is. They're obviously going to go with the person that has that more engaging audience. And then with that, that's where people can start working on that, right? If you're at a lower league, you're in the juniors, you're someone coming up, you're a teenager now, and you're expecting to be that day. Maybe that's something to start focusing on because now teams actually see that value. Where I know a few years ago when I was doing interviews with teams, I'd ask them, "Hey, would you guys ever work on athlete branding?" And I always got the answer, "No chance." We're like, "No way." They're like, "That's not the business we're in now." And I've had the same meetings and sometimes with the same people, and I'm like, "Yeah, we'd for sure look into that." So it's funny to see how it's gone. And one of the biggest things too is, over time, I think it started right just as a YouTube channel, Instagram page, and I think this year they got an $80 million investment from people like Jeff Bezos, Drake, the founder or co-founder of Reddit. So it's crazy how much media is taking over in content as a whole within the sports space.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to touch on there. I think the biggest thing is, and I think one of the lessons that we've probably learned is that uh, people want more content on demand. Like we've heard VOD a lot, like video on demand. And I think with the trends of what we're seeing now, where we're trying to, sports organizations and leagues are showing the personalities and the behind the scenes stuff from all these sports documentaries, kind of what we were talking about at the beginning there, Chris. It's just
Mm-hmm.
people trying to move more towards a virtual and a digital space where things are more on demand.
Yeah.
Now, one of my resolutions for 2022 is to stop speaking in buzzwords. So I hope I don't use the word virtual and digital anymore. But like putting it simply, we're used to Netflix, we're used to Instagram, Snapchat, Amazon Prime. We're used to turning things on and having things ready for us when we want to view them. Whether we want to binge a show, whether we want to pace ourselves, we have the ability to do so. And with these sports documentaries and with these sports kind of shows and series that are being created, it's kind of the same way. Someone binges Drive to Survive in a week, and now they become the biggest F1 fan. But you can't watch every F1 race in a week because they happen all throughout the year in their live events. So we're
Mm-hmm.
starting to see that, you can only have so many people crowded, or like kind of, you can only have so many people attend a live sporting event,
Mm-hmm.
and your revenue is capped at like how many people you can bring in at what price point you can sell it at. But if you want to grow more and you want to get higher and increase your potential, it's these on demand things and the idea of like connecting with people online
Yeah.
that sports leagues and organizations are probably tapping into. And honestly, like it's great that it's happening now. This is probably something that we could have talked about for every year in the 2010s and been like, hey, like this is a trend, this is a trend, this is a trend. But this year, with especially the contents kind of taking shape in the pandemic, I think as people got more isolated from live sporting events, they started becoming more used to demanding content on demand. And that's
Mm-hmm.
why this year, I think, really cemented that. And sports has clearly caught on to it. And I think they did a good job for 2021.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, right? Where we could have sent it for the last 10 years, right? Where I know when I always kind of been interested in like athlete marketing, sports marketing space. And then like, oh yeah, like it's gonna like turn right when I was younger. And then obviously once I was in university, et cetera, that's when you're starting to see a little turn right with certain athletes and people that kind of grew up on social media and content. That's when they're starting to push the agenda a bit more. But then with COVID, people being stuck at home, right, and wanting to be entertained, and getting that sports fix, these on demand or like these content pieces, right? That's what made them so successful too. And that was our only, and that's what people always wanted too, right? Whether it was 24/7 Hard Knocks, there's some other ones, but even like I'll just go back to my childhood, like Sens TV, and they would do like a behind the scenes of the Sens. Everyone loves that because you're actually seeing like, hey, this is my favorite player on the ice, but I want to see who they are, right? If this is like someone that I actually really like, and you know what? I remember like the 24/7 Winter Classic ones. I just loved Crosby and Marc-Andre Fleury even more after seeing them on TV, right? So it has a huge impact, and one of the biggest things too, right? With this year in review, talking about content, one of our most successful pieces that we've done, and surprisingly, I would never have guessed this, and I know people were telling me to do it, or I was researching and was saying to do it, um, was our live stream for the Canada soccer game, right? Here we are, these White Whale Marketing podcasts we've done for what, 20 episodes now. We prepare, we write these articles, and we kind of summarize, have these discussions about it, right? So there's work going into this. Whereas this live stream, it's like, hey guys, come. I think it was a last minute thing. I was at the gym. Like, guys, let's live stream ourselves watching the game. No prep, just kind of jumped into it. got it set up and we're going. And that's the one that people watched way more than these podcasts, right? So I was like, like what does the user want, right? So clearly people just want to have that human connection, whether it's getting to know what that athlete's like, or maybe even sitting or virtually sitting with someone while watching something of interest to you too. So that is pretty interesting, and yeah, you can kind of even go back to it to a sociological. So, I can't speak. I'm so tired. A social standpoint, where how people work now, right? Where people are watching other people watch things, which is just interesting on its own.
Yeah, and like I think one thing that the leagues, for example, leagues and teams for sure, they still have this impact and this enigma around them, but there's a lot of like, it's always the fans against the teams in the leagues. Obviously there's a lot of criticism for athletes and stuff when performance isn't up to par, let's say, or fans overreact. But for the most part, something that we can say is consistent is that fans typically hate the owners and commissioners of major sports leagues. I think with the MLB lockout, for example, that probably rings a lot more true in certain leagues compared to the others. But there's a reason why year in, year out, Gary Bettman is going to get booed at the NHL draft whenever it's live. Like, there's no way getting around that. Goodell got lucky because it was a virtual draft. He couldn't get booed in person. But with this whole idea of, like, the F1 drive to survive and stuff, there's a reason why, like, even with the behind the scenes stuff, also, I think we saw this in All or Nothing as well with the Leafs. People were sort of interested a little bit in, like, the behind the scenes stuff, like, oh, who's Dubas going to trade and stuff, and like the coaching aspect of it. But at the end of the day, what struck people the most were the stories behind, the athletes, like, getting to know what they do on a regular basis and all that kind of stuff. And it's that personality aspect, which I think is probably going to be an important part where we're going to touch on into our next topic. So I won't give away too much now, but it's just something to think about is when you're watching these content pieces on demand, who are you seeing? Who aren't you seeing? And is there a reason why, like the league is broadcasting or creating some piece of content where you're only getting the point of view from certain sides versus the other? And how that's like, like you said, from a sociological perspective, why are they creating content and why are they trying to make you think and feel a certain way about certain things within the sports community? I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, and let's just put it on the bow because you ended it perfectly. I think that kind of segues perfectly to our last topic, which is, as we're talking about the year in review, it was the year of the athlete, right? So athletes were putting the sports world on notice. They're taking things by storm. We saw some of the biggest moves in soccer history, right? With Messi, Ronaldo. We're seeing the actual impact that these single people, right? These individuals were having on these large, like ginormous franchises. Where they're like, hey, oh, you're a huge club? Yeah, that's fine. We're going to join you and then just show you what kind of numbers we can do from a ticketing, merchandise, and social standpoint, right? It was just nuts. And obviously we had dedicated episodes to each of these two icons switching clubs, but you still have to talk about it because it kind of trickles down to all levels. Obviously these guys are on GOAT status, Ronaldo and Messi. And, with COVID, there's obviously a lot of financial implications for these large clubs like Real Madrid, Barcelona. But I should have said Juventus, my bad, I'm tired. But then with Messi leaving Barcelona, that just kind of magnified these issues, right? Because as we said in these other podcasts, he was tied to a lot of the sponsorships, right? Because he built himself such a large brand where these companies like Rakuten or UNICEF, or I'm trying to remember clubs over the years that have been on his chest at Barcelona, but you get the point, right? Where they want to slap that logo on these star players, right? And when you do that, there's going to be much more eyeballs. You're going to see those jerseys on the street much more, meaning the teams can charge much more for these, jersey sponsorships, these signage, content. I know when I'd go visit Barcelona or whatever, even Madrid, all the signs when Ronaldo and Messi were there were all, those two players. So and with that, once they leave, you think Rakuten's going to be like, yeah, I'll pay you the exact same amount when Messi was here, and we have a quarter of the eyes. That's what I'll use because I can't think of the word right now. And no, they're not, right? And then with that, they're kind of budgeting themselves and saying, hey, like this is what we used to. We had all our eggs on that one pony. I don't know if that saying says, but I like it. And and that's when financial implications start taking a greater impact. But what teams should look to be doing in 2022, as we learned from 2021 how much an impact a player can have, is when you do have this star like Messi or Ronaldo, start sharing the pie a little bit, right? Pass the rock. If you have Messi, start including your young guns, your middle of the pack people, and grow their brands with them. Because once Messi leaves, once Ronaldo leaves, once they retire, X, Y, Z, if you have that strong base and have these strong brands built across these athletes, then you can kind of move forward with it. And other things that we've kind of noticed too with the year of the athlete is um, just in regards to like nil. That's a whole other topic we can kind of get into. And we had two other podcasts that you can check out in regards to, I think it was called the $500 Burger and the quarterback controversy in Oklahoma. Check those out. We talk about nil. They deserve their own episodes as they do. But that was huge, right? College athletes finally be able to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. So, Paral, I'll let you jump in here before I just run away with it. But, what were your thoughts on, athletes finally, taking a hold of their brands a bit more?
You know, as a proud member of White Whale Marketing, I'm all for it. 110%. And even beyond that, as a fan, I'm all for it because it's something that we talked about a bit earlier as well with the idea of personalities and stuff. It's hard to show personalities of like, the logos and like the organizational structure of a franchise, right? There's not a lot of loyalty you can tie there. But as a human, the human to human connection you can create with someone is unmatched. Like you cannot replicate that anyway. Like I know there's videos of people marrying robots and stuff. Totally fair. I get it. But the human to human connection is something that will never, ever, ever be rivaled. And that's what we see in sports too, right? Like as much as teams try their best to, create a revenue model that's sustainable and has nothing to do with the on ice product, like, the ticket sales team, the marketing team, the sponsorship team, the corporate partnerships team, none of them necessarily change their jobs and their day to day based on team's performance because you got to keep going. But when you have seismic changes like we saw in La Liga and even in Serie A with two of the biggest names in football just moving across to a whole different team, we notice that impact there, right? And like obviously, the corporate partnerships team, like they still had to go find corporate partners, but all of the groundwork they put in, the relationships they created with those people at Rakuten, for example, or before that, the Qatar Foundation or what have you, no matter, you could be the greatest corporate partnerships employee and the greatest senior director at a company, but you're not Messi, right? And so with that specific example, like you're not Messi. And so all that goodwill, the brand value, the sponsorship value is tied in within the athlete. And I think even beyond just looking at sponsorship dollars, I think it's easy to call every year the year of the athlete, but this year so much more because of, and we're going to say this again, and I think, whether it's now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, the pandemic has a lot of short-term and long-term consequences for the entire world, including sports. And what I'll say here is because we talked about, being in isolation, not being able to go to sporting events, not being able to interact and engage with your teams, your friends, your family, the way you used to in the past, what struck strongest is people getting to know the athletes during the pandemic. We learned stories about athletes, being isolated, working out at home, not having access to the gyms and stuff. You got to know a lot of athletes more through social media. You're not going to get to know the teams. Like, when the NHL shut down and stuff, like people weren't being like, oh, hey, Toronto Maple Leafs, how are you doing? Like, how's Shanahan doing? How's Dubas doing? How's Larry Tannenbaum and the board of directors doing? No, they're trying to see what Austin Matthews does in the pandemic. How did he quarantine? Oh, I didn't know Freddie Anderson and Austin Matthews were the best of friends. They hung out with each other in Arizona. At the end of the day, when you talk about what you learned over the pandemic and what you did with the interactions that people did with sports, it's the athlete, the name, the player, the face. It's all that name, image, and likeness. It's literally the nil that people are going to remember. And I think, I talked about NFTs being the biggest acronym in sports for 2021, but maybe nil is right up there.
Yeah, no, you're completely right. And I guess one of the other things, like just kind of piggybacking off that, is when people say face of the franchise, it's not just on the field, on the ice, right? It's literally the face of the whole business, the whole franchise, right? Where, like you're saying, no one's going to move numbers, right? Other than that, than a face. The logo is the logo. As the team does well, it'll grow. But it's those faces, right? When, like we're saying, these partnership deals, when they go up, when ticketing goes up, it's because that person's actually pulling people in, whether it's their talent on the pitch or they're doing something else where I'm trying to think of someone right now who's had like crazy jersey sales just because of like their personality. I can't think of it right now, but there's some athletes that they do well just from who they are as people, right? And because of that, we saw a lot of deals, and maybe because white whale marketing and the inception of it, I started to learn inside things a bit more, where a lot of deals are tied to these athletes, right? And because of that, the athlete, when you look at the numbers, because I think we did a whole episode, might have been one of our first episodes, where we actually had the numbers behind it, where um, when the athlete is a part of the deal, the athlete actually provides way more at times value to the potential partner than the club actually does on their own, right? Because even today, I forget why I was looking at some teams' social accounts, tons of followers, but their posts get a couple hundred likes and they have 40,000 followers. Makes no sense. Whereas, being that we're in Canada, we have Canucks jerseys behind Harral. When I look at hockey players' numbers, it's disgusting. It's not fair. They have let's say 10,000 followers, and then they get 4,000 likes, right? Where those are the people actually engaging. Those are the people that are actually touching, those fans. So
It's a
it's
good
great.
point there. I'm gonna
Yeah,
pause 1 second. I'm gonna show you something, and then I'll get back to you.
go for it. Let's see what he's doing.
Let's just say, well, two reasons. Number one, there's no names on the back of the Canucks jerseys, but there's a reason why you see the front-facing logos of the Canucks jersey, even if there was a name on the back, and why that bad boy over there has that name. You'll understand why I own those jerseys based on what you're looking at and what I'm showing from the jersey. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, right? Where um, the last thing I was gonna say in regards to that too is I think that was, we're talking about year in review. That's the thing that's taking place in 2021. We're like, hey, like athletes are able to, push the needle themselves, right? They have much more value than maybe they knew of, right? Where these sponsorship deals, these impacts they have on creating communities or even discussions or whatever else, the athlete kind of drives the bus for that. But what I like to do and what I think we're going to try focusing on White Whale Marketing 2022 is educating athletes and even the sports world and hopefully even brands and partners is the worth of these athletes, right? Because I've gone into meetings and we have fair is fair, we have the proper numbers, we have the analytics behind it, and people are like, oh no, we're just going to do this. It's like, oh no, 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 no. Where athletes, I think too much have been what's the word here, underappreciated for their impact off the pitch, right? I think depending on the sport, they get paid handsomely for their efforts, depending on the sport, is what I'll say. But I think off the field, maybe because it's an area that they're not as educated in, or their agents are much more focused on their contracts rather than their deals off the pitch. I think that's where teams are struggling. So hopefully, when we talk about this in a year's time, and really, hey, in 2022, we saw the impact of athletes knowing their worth, right? Where, hey, this year they made an impact of, hey, our brands have a voice, and hopefully next year those voices are compensated generously or fairly, is what I should say. That's all I'll say. But yeah, that's I think year in review. I think from a sports marketing, white whale marketing point of view. But Haral, is there anything else you'd like to touch on?
I'll say it's been a long year for sure, for everyone, and I think for us as well, we've learned a lot. Uh,
Yeah.
the reason why probably 2021 has been the biggest year for white whale marketing is because AJ and I weren't here before that. So yeah,
You know, white whale marketing, but
yeah, there you go, right? So it's been a big year for sports. It's been a big year for white whale marketing. You'll notice that the whale logo that in the top right there, there's a reason why the whale's pointing up. That's just because it's onwards and upwards from here. I think with a lot of the trends that we've seen this year as well, you'll notice there's a reason why white whale marketing's probably made a splash in each one of the three topics that we talked about here. So come 365 days from now, when we look at the 2022 trends as well, you'll see the same amount of if not more, of white whale in those trends as well. Let me just say that.
yeah, 100%. I guess all I'll say, knock on wood, let's just say, hopefully this time next year, the impact that we've had in these three topics are a drip compared to the splash that we're going to have. So can't wait to talk to you again on our next episode in the new year. and for people to listen and people in the future to listen to. But happy holidays, happy new year. Talk soon.
Happy New Year, everybody.